The Rising Force Asterisk stood in the heart of the Federation space station, a towering metallic behemoth more than 100 kilometers long, dwarfing the crews that swarmed within it. Captain Evan Stroud paced the bridge, his boots echoing against the sleek black floor as he inspected every console, every sensor, every piece of equipment that made this warship the crown jewel of human engineering. His eyes moved methodically over the data streams, the readouts of weapons, shields, and tactical systems all flashing green. For now, everything was in its place. "Captain," came the calm voice of Lieutenant Sarah Holt, the ship's chief engineer. She stepped up beside him, her uniform immaculate despite the last-minute repairs they had been rushing to complete. "We're ready for the maiden voyage. The Rising Force is fully operational." Stroud nodded without looking at her. His mind wasn't on the readiness of the ship, but on the weight of the mission. Humanity had poured decades of research, billions of credits, and countless lives into the construction of the Titan-class warship. With this ship, humanity would no longer be a weak species dependent on alliances and diplomacy. With this ship, they would become the predators of the stars. "Good. But we're not just testing this ship. We're testing humanity's place in the galaxy," Stroud said, his voice low but resolute. He turned away from the windows overlooking the void, his back now to the panoramic view of the star-filled expanse. "We need to be ready for anything." Holt shifted her weight slightly, a worried glance flickering across her face, though she kept it hidden beneath her professional demeanor. "And what if we're not? What if we're not ready?" Stroud didn't answer immediately. He knew exactly what Holt was thinking. There were whispers across the station about the Zorath Empire. Rumors. Innuendo. But Stroud had a feeling that those whispers weren't just paranoia. They were a warning. Zorathian ships had been spotted near Federation borders. It was only a matter of time before they made a move. The Zorathians didn't play by anyone's rules. They were a ruthless, technologically advanced empire that saw humanity as little more than a nuisance. "We'll be ready," Stroud finally said, his voice firm. "We have to be." A sudden beep from the communications console interrupted their conversation. The bridge crew fell silent, watching as the screen flickered to life, displaying a distorted signal. The words that followed were chilling. "Captain Stroud, this is High Command. You have 5 minutes. Zorathian scouts are inbound." Stroud's heart skipped a beat. He immediately snapped to attention, signaling the crew to go into full readiness. "Prepare for battle stations," he ordered, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. The crew quickly shifted into action, their training kicking in. Lieutenant Commander Jason Forbes, the tactical officer, leaned forward, his fingers flying over the console. "Multiple Zorathian ships detected, Captain. They're coming fast, and they're not alone." Stroud's mind raced, calculating the options, but the truth was clear. There was no time to retreat. Humanity's first test against the Zorath Empire had arrived, and it would happen here, at the very edge of human space. The Rising Force was designed to be humanity's ultimate weapon, but it was also a symbol of everything they had hoped to achieve. The stakes were nothing short of survival. "Launch the drones. Prepare the Archangel cannons for full power," Stroud ordered, turning to Forbes. "Aye, Captain," Forbes responded, his voice unwavering. The tension on the bridge was palpable as Stroud watched the crew execute their orders. The Titan-class warship was a thing of beauty, its sleek, angular shape a testament to the cutting-edge technology humanity had developed. But it was more than just a marvel of engineering. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, a force that could obliterate entire fleets with a single shot. Stroud watched the countdown on the main screen, every second stretching into eternity. They were about to unleash that power. The Zorathians wouldn't know what hit them. Suddenly, a loud beep from the sensor array rang through the bridge. "Incoming transmission," reported Lieutenant Naomi Parks, the communications officer. The screen crackled to life again, and this time, a face appeared, pale, with sharp, angular features and a presence that radiated cold arrogance. "Captain Stroud," the Zorathian leader, Jean Carr, said, his voice low and threatening. "You think the ship will save you?" You think your kind has a place among the stars? You're nothing but insects crawling beneath our feet. The Zorath Empire does not tolerate resistance. Stroud's jaw tightened. He had been briefed on Jean Carr, an ancient and ruthless warlord, infamous for his ability to crush his enemies without mercy. The Zorathians had already defeated dozens of galactic civilizations. But Stroud wasn't about to let humanity be another footnote in their conquests. "We'll see about that," Stroud said, his voice laced with a cold confidence that belied the tension building inside him. "This warship is humanity's future, and we will fight for it. We won't just roll over like the rest of your victims." Jean Carr's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Foolish human, your arrogance will be your undoing. You will beg for mercy when I am finished with you." The transmission cut off, and for a brief moment, Stroud could only stare at the empty screen, the threat lingering in the air like a storm cloud. Forbes turned to Stroud, his face hard. "Captain, we're ready. We have the advantage." Stroud nodded. The time had come to prove their worth. "Fire the first salvo," he commanded. The rising force shuddered as its weapons systems hummed to life. A streak of blue light tore through the darkness of space, striking the lead Zorathian vessel with the force of a planetary bombardment. The ship disintegrated in a fiery explosion, and Stroud's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the Zorathian fleet begin to scatter. But this was only the beginning. "Captain, we've lost visual on the Zorathian fleet," Forbes reported, his voice tense. "I don't care if they're in the shadows or out in the open. Keep firing. We're not stopping until we show them exactly what humanity is capable of." As the rising force continued its barrage, Stroud knew this battle was only the beginning. The Zorath Empire had now made their move. Humanity's response would decide whether they were just another species to be crushed underfoot, or whether they would rise to claim their place among stars. The rising force was a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and yet it was being pushed to its limits. Stroud stood at the helm, watching the battle unfold on the massive display screen. The Zorathian fleet, larger than their initial reconnaissance had suggested, had regrouped after the first wave. They were no longer the disorganized skirmishers they had been moments ago. This was a full-scale assault. The rising force had taken down one of their ships, but now the true challenge began. Shields at 70%, Lieutenant Holt's voice echoed through the bridge. The engineering officer's calm tone barely concealed the tension that ran through the crew. "We've taken some damage to the port side. We're holding, but not for long." Stroud clenched his jaw. Every impact felt like a punch to his gut, but he wouldn't show it. Not here. Not now. Humanity's fate rested on their ability to hold their ground against the Zorathian onslaught. He turned sharply toward Commander Forbes, whose fingers danced across the console, preparing their next move. "Can we hit them with the Archangel again?" Stroud asked, his voice calm, though his thoughts raced. The Archangel cannons were their trump card, the most devastating weapon the rising force had. But after using it once, it would take a few minutes to recharge. Forbes didn't look up from his console, but answered quickly. "The Archangel is recharging, Captain. We're low on energy reserves as well. Sustained fire on all cannons is burning through our power. If we don't do something soon, we won't have enough left to fire again." Stroud's eyes narrowed. He understood the stakes. They couldn't afford to keep fighting on their current path. The rising force was powerful, but the Zorathians had more numbers, more firepower, and an unyielding will to crush anything in their way. But they weren't prepared for humanity's sheer determination. "Redirect power to forward shields," Stroud ordered, tapping the control panel. "We need to buy more time for the Archangel. If we can hold them off long enough, we'll end this." There was a brief hesitation before Holt responded. "Understood, Captain. Shields recalibrating." "But, Captain, we've got a bigger problem." Before Stroud could respond, the tactical screen blinked red. A new fleet of Zorathian ships had appeared from the shadows of the nearby asteroid field. They were smaller than the initial wave, but their movements were precise, coordinated, too coordinated. "Zorathian command ship, Captain," Forbes said, his voice low with realization. "They've brought in their flagship. That's where the fleet is being controlled from." Stroud felt a chill run through him. The Zorathian command ship was an engine of destruction, capable of coordinating entire fleets and directing fire in a way that would break the human force's cohesion in minutes. This was no longer just a battle. It was an extermination effort. How long until their flagship can fire? Stroud asked. Forbes didn't answer immediately. He was calculating. The silence on the bridge was deafening. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and resigned. We have 3 minutes, Captain. If they fire before we get into range, they'll tear through our defenses. Then we have 3 minutes to finish this, Stroud said, standing tall and meeting the eyes of his officers. Prepare to launch all drones. We're going in hard. The command room exploded with activity. Drones were released into space, small yet powerful vessels designed to intercept enemy fire, distract the Zorathians, and weaken their defenses. The crew worked as if they were extensions of the ship itself. Every motion precise, every action calculated for maximum impact. Stroud watched the crew work in awe. There was no hesitation in their actions. He knew they weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for survival. Launching drones, Holt reported. Drones are engaging Zorathian interceptors. The battle intensified, and Stroud focused on the tactical display in front of him. The drones were causing chaos in the Zorathian ranks, distracting their heavy ships and buying them precious time. It wasn't much, but it was something. As the minutes ticked down, Stroud felt the weight of the responsibility growing heavier. This battle was his. This war was his. The rising force had been humanity's hope for a future beyond the crumbling Federation borders, a future where they no longer cowered beneath the shadows of galactic empires. The Zorathians wanted to crush that future, but Stroud wouldn't let it happen. "We have incoming fire," shouted Parks from the communications console. Stroud didn't have to ask how bad it was. The vibration beneath his feet told him everything he needed to know. "Brace for impact," he ordered. "Deploy all countermeasures. Use everything we've got." Forbes's voice came through once more, sharp and urgent. "We can't outgun their flagship at this range, Captain. We need a distraction, a clear shot." Stroud thought for a moment. The Archangel was still recharging. They had no time to waste. His mind worked fast, calculating the risk. His gaze shifted to Lieutenant Holt, who was still focused on the energy readings, the harsh light of the console reflecting off her face. He knew what he had to do. "Lieutenant, can we push the reactor's output? Just enough for a single shot." Holt's eyes flickered to him, her face pale. "It's risky, Captain. The reactor is already under strain. One more overload, and we're done. But if you're asking for one shot, I can make it happen. But you need to make it count." Stroud nodded grimly. There was no turning back now. "Prepare the shot. I'll get us in position." He turned to the helm officer. "Helm, full speed. Get us within range of their flagship." The ship lurched forward as the crew pushed the rising force to its maximum speed. The Zorathians weren't ready for this. They hadn't anticipated the sheer audacity of human tactics. "Energy is at critical levels," Holt warned, her voice taut with strain. "We'll have enough for the shot in 30 seconds. "Good," Stroud said. His knuckles whitened around the console, his focus locked on the flagship. If this didn't work, they were done. "Everyone, get ready." The seconds felt like hours as the ship closed the distance. The crew's collective tension was palpable, their breath held in unison. Stroud's mind was a blur, but one thought anchored him: survival. For humanity. For the future. "Now," Stroud commanded. Holt pushed the reactor to its limits. A violent surge of energy coursed through the ship, and the rising force fired. The shot tore through the vacuum of space with blinding intensity. The flagship's shields faltered and cracked under the strain. In a moment of explosive brilliance, the energy beam hit its target. The flagship shuddered and then erupted in a ball of fire, the Zorathian fleet scattering in panic. Stroud watched the explosion, the realization dawning in him slowly. They had done it, but the war was far from over. The aftermath of the battle left the rising force battered but intact. Stroud stood in the observation deck, staring out at the field of debris that had once been the Zorathian flagship. The faintest remnants of the explosion still lingered in space, slowly dispersing into the void. Their victory was hard-earned, but the toll on their ship was undeniable. The bridge had returned to a tense quiet, the usual hum of the systems now replaced by the occasional sharp buzz of alarms. "Report," Stroud said, his voice cutting through the silence. Holt appeared at his side, her face weary, her uniform covered in the faint remnants of sweat. "We've sustained significant damage, Captain. Shields are down to 40%, and our engines are barely functioning at full capacity. If we're pursued, we won't outrun them. The rising force will need to be docked and repaired soon, or we risk being vulnerable." Stroud nodded, his thoughts running through the options. The Zorathian fleet had scattered for now, but their command ship had gone down in a brilliant flash of light. What would follow was inevitable. The enemy would regroup, reorganize. They had made a bold strike, but there was still more to be done. There always was. "Get us back to Federation space," Stroud said. "We need repairs. Set a course for the nearest dockyard. I don't care if it's crawling with enemy ships. We're not sticking around here any longer than we have to." "Aye, Captain," Holt replied, her fingers tapping a few quick commands into her console. The ship rumbled beneath them as the engines struggled to respond. The rising force might have won the battle, but it was clear they hadn't won the war. Stroud turned, pacing slowly across the bridge, the weight of command pressing down on him. They had done the impossible, taken out a flagship, crippled a fleet, but at what cost? He couldn't afford to dwell on it. Not yet. Not while the stakes were so high. "Lieutenant Forbes," Stroud called out to the operations officer. "Is the enemy in pursuit?" Forbes leaned over his console, scanning the incoming data. "They're not in pursuit, Captain, but I'm reading several ships starting to reorganize on the edge of the system. They'll be back, and when they do, they'll come with everything they have." "Of course," Stroud muttered under his breath. He stopped and looked at his crew, their faces grim but resolute. "We'll be ready for them." A soft chime interrupted the moment. The communications system blinked to life. "Incoming transmission, Captain. It's from Admiral Morrow." Stroud's jaw tightened. The Federation's high command was calling. He couldn't avoid it. He stepped forward, his fingers brushing over the console, accepting the call. "Captain Stroud." Admiral Morrow's voice came through, calm and authoritative. "You've done well in taking down the Zorathian flagship. But you know as well as I do that this is far from over. We've detected Zorathian reinforcements on their way." "I know, Admiral," Stroud replied, keeping his voice steady. "We've already begun our retreat toward Federation space. We'll need repairs before we can continue, but we'll hold our position. We won't back down. Don't get too comfortable, Captain. We've got a new order for you. We need you to push forward. The Federation cannot afford to sit idly by while the Zorathians regroup. There's a base hidden deep within their territory. We've located it, but we need you to secure it. We believe it's where they're building their next fleet." Stroud's chest tightened. It was a bold order, one that would take the rising force straight into the heart of enemy space. The risks were enormous, but the stakes had always been high. "Understood, Admiral. We'll proceed as ordered," Stroud said, though he knew the path ahead would be treacherous. "I'm counting on you, Captain. I'll send you the coordinates." Morrow out. The screen flickered off, and the tension in the room increased tenfold. The crew turned to Stroud, waiting for the next move. He had made a commitment, but this was different. A hidden base deep within enemy territory, the heart of Zorathian production, was not something to be taken lightly. "It's a new course," Stroud said, meeting each of their eyes. "We're heading straight into the lion's den. I want the crew ready for anything. Load up the drones, prepare the Archangel cannons, and bring the reactor up to full power. We're not going to just sit back and wait for reinforcements. We're going to hit them where it hurts." Holt nodded, her face serious. "It's risky, Captain, but if we destroy that base, it could cripple the Zorathians for good. Their production capacity will be cut down significantly." Stroud nodded. "Exactly, and that's why we can't afford to fail. Set a course, Lieutenant Forbes. Let's get this done." As the ship powered into action once more, Stroud's mind raced. The decision he had made to engage the Zorathians head-on had already cost them dearly, but it was a calculated risk. And now, with their target in sight, the cost would only increase. There was no turning back, no second chances. Hours passed in a blur as they moved deeper into enemy territory. The crew remained at their stations, the quiet hum of the ship providing a tense backdrop to their focused efforts. Stroud could feel the pressure mounting as they approached the coordinates the Federation had provided. They were entering the unknown. Every moment could bring them closer to disaster. "We're almost there, Captain," Forbes reported, his voice steady despite the growing uncertainty. "It looks like there's a cloaked minefield ahead. We'll need to navigate carefully." Stroud's mind shifted into overdrive. The rising force had dealt with similar threats before, but this would be different. They needed precision, they needed speed. A single mistake could cost them everything. "I'll take the helm," Stroud said, his voice commanding. "I don't want any surprises. Guide me through the minefield, Forbes." "Hold. Stay on the reactor. We're going to need every ounce of power." Forbes moved to the tactical console, pulling up a visual map of the minefield. "The mines are scattered in a random pattern, Captain. It'll take time to clear a path." "Then we'll make our own path," Stroud said firmly, his hands steady on the controls. The ship jolted as they entered the outer edges of the minefield. A warning light flashed across the console as the first mines were detected. "Steady," Stroud muttered, eyes fixed on the glowing path ahead. "Hold your breath." Every movement was calculated, every shift in the ship's trajectory precise. The crew was silent, watching as the ship danced around the hidden mines, narrowly avoiding each one. "We're through," Forbes said, his voice breaking the tension. "The base is ahead." Stroud allowed himself a brief moment to exhale. But it was only the beginning. They were about to face the heart of the Zorathian war machine, and it was now or never. "Prepare for attack," he said, his voice steely. "Let's finish this." The rising force emerged from the dense asteroid field into a massive expanse of black. Ahead of them lay the Zorathian base, a sprawling fortress hidden beneath the cloak of a nearby planet's gravity well. It was a monstrosity, a design born of war, something built to withstand an entire fleet's assault. It loomed like a silent giant, its exterior bristling with weapon systems, its dark silhouette blending seamlessly with the surrounding space. For a moment, Stroud was reminded of the first time he'd set his eyes on a battlefield, the same quiet before the storm. "We're in position, Captain," Holt's voice broke through the stillness. Her fingers were dancing across the console as she monitored the ship's readiness. The reactors hummed steadily in the background. "All systems are green. But once we engage, we won't have much time before reinforcements arrive." "Understood," Stroud replied, his eyes narrowing at the flickering hologram of the Zorathian base. "We don't need much time. We hit them fast, hit them hard." He turned to face the crew, his mind working quickly through the steps. The mission was simple in theory. Infiltrate, disable the base's power core, and escape before the enemy could rally. But Stroud knew better than to underestimate the Zorathians. They weren't just a scattered band of raiders. They were a highly organized military force. If anything, the base was a trap. "We're going to breach the outer defense perimeter first," Stroud continued, his voice steady, almost detached. "Once we've cleared the perimeter, we'll make a direct approach to the power core." "Holt, you're with me on the ground. Forbes, I want you and your team coordinating the drone strikes. Make sure we have eyes everywhere." "Aye, Captain," Holt replied, locking her gaze with Stroud. There was no room for fear in her eyes, only resolve. "Once we breach the core, there'll be a countdown. I'll need the team to get out of there fast," Stroud added, moving towards the central command station. He looked at Forbes and the others. "This isn't just about disabling the Zorathians. It's about sending a message." Forbes nodded sharply, his hands already shifting through the tactical screens. "We'll give them hell, Captain." "Good. Let's make it count," Stroud said, then turned to leave the bridge. The transport bay was buzzing with activity as Stroud and Holt geared up for the ground assault. The rest of the crew was preparing to man the ship, making sure the rising force was ready to make an immediate retreat. The atmosphere in the bay was tense. Each member of the crew knew the risks they were taking, but there was no fear in their movements. It was a calm, collected focus, honed by years of training. Stroud adjusted the straps on his armor, running a hand over the sleek surface of his weapon before clipping it into place. Holt stood beside him, double-checking her gear. Her expression was set, her usual calm demeanor replaced with a razor-sharp edge. "Ready?" Stroud asked her, his voice lower than usual. Holt gave a quick nod. "I'm always ready, Captain. Let's get this done." They stepped into the transport shuttle, the door sliding shut behind them. The engines whined to life as the shuttle detached from the rising force, its small frame racing toward the base. Through the small viewport, Stroud could see the gleaming walls of the Zorathian fortress growing closer, the defensive turrets already shifting toward them. They had been detected. "We're going to need a diversion," Stroud muttered under his breath. He tapped a few commands into his wrist pad, activating a series of drones that immediately launched from the rising force. The small machines darted ahead, laying down a barrage of electronic jamming fire. The Zorathians' defensive systems sputtered for a moment before they adjusted, but it was enough. The shuttle was able to slip through the gap. "Shielding is holding," Holt called out, checking the readout on her screen. "We're in the clear for now, but it won't last long." Stroud nodded. "Brace for impact." The shuttle collided with the outermost perimeter of the Zorathian base, the hull scraping against the fortress as they came to a sudden halt. The shuttle's doors exploded outward, and Stroud and Holt were immediately on their feet, weapons raised. The air around them was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal and ozone, a side effect of their makeshift landing. They dashed forward, moving swiftly but cautiously. Every step was calculated. Inside the base, the halls were dark, illuminated only by the faint blue glow of emergency lights. There was no sound, no sign of life. Stroud's instinct screamed that something was wrong, but there was no time to dwell on it. "Where is everyone?" Holt whispered, her voice tense but controlled. Stroud motioned for silence, scanning the area ahead. The tension in the air was palpable. The base felt empty. "Keep your guard up," Stroud murmured. "Something's off here." They continued down the corridor, weapons raised, their footfalls echoing in the sterile silence. At the end of the hall, a heavy door stood locked. Stroud gestured to Holt, signaling her to cover him as he approached the control panel. A few quick commands, and the door slid open. Inside, they found what they had expected, a high-security access point leading directly to the power core. But it wasn't just the power core that caught Stroud's attention. It was the large, armored figures standing motionless in the room. The Zorathian elite, their advanced exosuits gleaming in the dim light. "You're too late," a cold voice echoed from the shadows. Stroud's blood ran cold. The figure stepped forward, its face hidden behind a gleaming helmet. The Zorathian leader, Viker. His presence was overwhelming, his energy palpable, as though every part of the room belonged to him. Stroud's hand tightened around his weapon. "I knew you'd be waiting." Viker's laugh echoed in the silence, low and menacing. "You think this was a trap? This was a test, Captain, and you've passed. Now, we see if you're truly worthy of what's to come." Holt took a step forward, her gaze hardening. "What do you want?" Viker's response was a slow, deliberate pause. "What we want is simple, a war to end all wars. And you're standing in the way of that. The Rising Force is more than just a ship, Captain Stroud. It's the key to a much greater plan." Stroud's mind raced, trying to make sense of the unexpected turn of events. The Zorathian leader wasn't just after power. He was playing a much deeper game. But there was no time for answers now. Only action. Stroud gestured to Holt. "Take the core. I'll handle this." The fight had begun.